What's up, everyone? It's Dr. Glenn Vo, and I'm super excited to have the guys behind Money Insights, Christian Allen and Rod Zabriskie. Guys, how's it going?
Doing
great.
Awesome. Glenn, thanks for having us today. We're super excited to be with you.
Well, I really wanted to bring you back on because, a lot has changed since the last time you were on. I mean, we were going into a pandemic that we thought was going to end very soon, and here it is. It's still around, right? Also, there's differences now. Obviously, we went through an election. There's a lot of people in the group that are concerned, that have so many questions, and it's near the end of the year. So we wanted to bring you guys on, talk about kind of tax strategies. But before we go any further, for those new members in our group and for those who missed the last Facebook Live, Christian, just talk about what Money Insights is all about and how you help health professionals really grow their wealth.
Absolutely. Happy to do it. So Money Insights is a strategic wealth building firm that helps high income earners move from high income to high net worth. Like, put really simply, that's what we're about. And so our strategies are specifically designed for physicians and dentists to help them move the needle and start keeping more of the money that they're earning. And that's why today's topic is so great, because that's a big part of it, right? Taxation has a huge impact on high income earners. So our role and our goal is to make sure that we help high income earners keep more of what they earn so that they can ultimately get from high income to high net worth.
I love that. And Rod, I want to ask you this question here, because a lot of times when people think about tax strategies, they think, oh, I'm trying to get out of paying taxes. I'm trying to find a way to scam my way out of not paying Uncle Sam his due, right?
Yeah.
But really, it's not about that. It's about just being smart. It's actually playing within the rules. So can you just address that to all our members? Because sometimes when they think of tax strategy, they're thinking, okay, am I trying to do something illegal that could come back and put myself in trouble legally? So Rod,
talk about do that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, we don't want to be involved in tax evasion, right? That would be a bad thing. But there are legitimate things built into the tax code where we can, and actually it's interesting because Uncle Sam wants us to participate in certain things. And so they set up certain activities that if you participate in those things, then they'll give you tax breaks. So a lot of the things that are just the default, the thing people think about, the 401k IRA. We're going to get into this in some more detail here a little bit later, but those things, I think it's better to think of those as tax deferral, right? Someday we're going to pay that tax. We're not paying it today. We're going to pay it later. But there are a lot of things built into the tax code that are actual tax savings. And it's not just pushing it to a later time. It's actually saying, hey, I'm going to pay less in tax because I'm doing these things. But it takes proactive planning. It takes understanding and aligning yourself with a CPA or an accountant who understands and can help you do those things. And so those are the kinds of things we'll be getting into today.
Well, a lot of the tax strategies, Glenn, are actually built to stimulate the economy, right? So there's a reason that they get put into the tax code. So if you're a business owner, for example, there's all sorts of tax opportunities that you can take advantage of. We're going to hit on some of those, but we're also going to make sure that we move into some of the things that maybe people are less familiar with. We like to play in what we call the alternative space, which means things like real estate, businesses, things like that. We're going to get into how to utilize some of the less common alternative strategies that can give, like Rod said, a permanent tax reduction, in addition to hitting on some of those traditional things that we think of like qualified plans. So I think we'll hit on kind of the whole gamut, and then we can talk a little bit about, what the recent election means for taxes based on what we've seen in the past. And, we'll see what happens down the road. Obviously, we don't know for certain, but we'll get into that question as well.
Yeah, I love that. And guys, for those who are watching right now, if you have any questions, type it in the comments section. I'm looking at the comments. But if you want to be anonymous, which I already got a few questions already, message it to me. I have another window up. I'm looking at the questions there. And guys, if you like what you're hearing right now, if you want to learn about a nifty deal, type in the comments section, Money Insights. Okay, guys, I got the first question already. And that is, my CPA, I think my CPA is way too conservative and not looking for ways for me to save in taxes. What should I do? Should I fire the CPA? Do I need to get professionals like yourself to talk to them? how would I handle this? That's a pretty
Man,
good.
what a great question. I
That is a
like
great
that he's
question.
thinking that way, right?
Right?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'd love to answer that, and Rod, you can take a shot at it. But here's my thought: you definitely should consider changing CPAs if you feel like they're not meeting your needs, right? And so the way to do that would be to interview 3 other CPAs. So don't just go with one. Make sure that you interview 3 of them, and that way you can get an idea of who's going to most appropriately align with you. And then as it relates to the actual tax strategies, here's what we find. Some CPAs are proactive, but they're kind of few and far between, right? So most CPAs help us to file our taxes at the end of the year. As a high income earner, it's absolutely pivotal that we have good representation from an accounting standpoint. And so certainly that's something that we can help with. We're obviously very proactive in helping people with tax strategies specifically to how they can do that in conjunction with investing. But my thought on that is absolutely interview 3, and we're of course happy to give recommendations on that. And then of course, if we visit with you, then we'll talk about some ideas to kind of move that direction as well.
Yeah, the thing I would add to that is you're not alone. It's unfortunate that the majority of the CPAs out there really are just filing tax returns and looking backward and saying, okay, what happened this past year? How are we going to do this? All right, now let's throw some money into a SEP or a 401k or something like that, kind of retroactively saying, here are the things that you can do so that you don't have to pay as much in taxes right now. And so, yeah, your question is perfect, because that is a critical piece to getting in a place where you can, not just right now, not just saying, oh, I hate to write the check this moment, but in future years, forevermore, right? But just building into your process strategies where you can be proactively making that happen.
So I have this same doctor has a follow-up question, and he's saying that I've tried to do alternative investments. My CPA always tries to talk me out of it because he thinks it's very risky. We're still doing the same thing that I did when I graduated from dental school, and I'm still doing it 12 years later.
Okay, so I love the honesty behind his questions, right? So here's what people don't realize, and this is across the board. This is your CPAs in general, that the risk-adjusted return, which means the amount of risk I'm taking in conjunction with the investment, can often be and generally is more favorable in the alternative space. So in other words, there's opportunities to get better returns, but just because there's opportunities to get better returns doesn't inherently make it more risky, right? So what's really interesting is a lot of the alternative investors would say just the opposite. They would say that, just getting into stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, like they would say, that's risky. I don't know what's going to happen. I can lose money there. But over here in this space, I can really control the dynamics in a way that can be more impactful. So I think the answer to that question is that you probably, you sound like someone who needs to be considering other ideas and maybe considering another CPA.
And one thing that we've found, and it's really pretty consistent across the board with CPAs, is we look to them to be the experts in everything, right? And yet, any individual can't necessarily be an expert in everything, but they don't want us to put that across, right? So if you ask a direct question about, hey, I'm thinking about doing X, Y, and Z investing, and they're not familiar with it, they're not going to admit that. Their default answer is going to be, yeah, I don't think you want to do that. I just don't see a lot of people in my office doing that, and therefore it must be a bad idea, right? Whereas we know that that's not the case, right? And so again, aligning yourself with a CPA who is familiar with those things and can really help you evaluate like the tax part of it, right? Having them help you in the area where they are an expert is the right way to go.
Now, I have a follow-up question for myself, following up what that doctor just asked there, and that is, in different stages in life, you have different needs and requirements, right? I mean, if you're someone who just got out of school and you're not married yet, you don't have any kids, well, then you only need certain things, right? But as you get married and you have kids and you have other responsibilities, then you're thinking about, okay, you got to think about estate planning, you got to think about trust, you didn't think of all these different things. Would you guys say that, well, maybe what was okay for like this doctor, same strategy since he graduated 12 years ago, okay, still doing the same thing? Isn't that kind of like a red flag that you're still doing the same thing and yet your income and your life has changed significantly since you left school?
I mean, I would agree with you on that. And that's, I mean, you have to start somewhere, right? And so if you say, okay, this is my starting point. But well, put it this way, we really advocate balance, right? In other words, if we get way too heavy, whether it's inside of the practice, all the money I ever get, I'm just always dumping it back into the practice and building that. That's great. It'll take you great places. But if that's every dollar, then there could obviously be major problems that come as a result of that. Well, the same is true if I'm dumping everything into the stock market, if I'm dumping everything into, just that, the practice, the commercial building, everything associated with the practice, then, anyway, but so I agree with what you're saying. We need to have a starting point, but we need to build over time to diversify ourselves. Diversification is not just relevant inside of an investment portfolio, right? We need to diversify into different investment classes, and that includes the way that they're taxed. Because if everything is going in pre-tax, for example, then on the back end, everything is going to come out post-tax. Whereas if we can do some mix today, and like I said, especially we're mixing in some of those things where it's permanent tax savings, then it will just be in a completely different place.
All right. And Christian, I want to go back to something that you said that was very interesting. And I'm sure a lot of members heard the same thing. And that is, you're talking about using tax deferment strategies, but these strategies were actually, it's not something that you guys kind of concocted or looked for a loophole. These are actually strategies that the government put in place to stimulate the economy. So talk about that, and let's kind of go into what those strategies are for some of our members who are not familiar with them.
Yeah, that sounds great. So basically, we're going to break them into kind of two parts, right? We're going to have the alternative tax strategies, and we're going to have qualified plans, which is the more common way that people think of doing tax planning. So here's what happens. In the qualified world, there's basically two types of plans. There's what's called the defined contribution plan, and there's what's called the defined benefit plan. And they're just what they sound like, right? The defined contribution is like your 401k. You delineate exactly how much you're going to put into it. If it's a traditional, then it's going to be a tax deduction right then. In other words, if I have a $250,000 income and I put a $25,000 into my 401k, then I'm going to get a reduction in that year of $25,000 from my income. Now that money is going to go into the plan. It's going to grow tax deferred. And then ultimately when I take it out, I'm going to be pulling out money. Now, the idea behind qualified plans is that everyone's going to be in a lower tax bracket later. Well, there's really two problems with that. One is if you're really good at building wealth, if you work with people like us that do it the right way, like you're going to build wealth, and you're certainly not going to be in the same tax bracket when you retire as you were early on in your career. Most often it's going to be, it would be higher, or your income would be up at the very least. Now I get it. There are exceptions to that. If you're 55 and haven't started saving really yet, then there could be really good reasons to use qualified plans to get big deductions for future income. But that's the first kind of problem with it. The second one is, where are taxes likely to go, right? So this is kind of the age-old question. Are taxes likely to stay to go up, down, or stay the same? And I think most people listening agree that it would be difficult to see taxes going down, right? We've got this massive national debt. We have some, government programs that are kind of a disaster. Somehow we have to start getting out of that hole, right? So the likelihood is that taxes actually go up rather than down. So that's kind of the challenges behind it. Let me get back to this really quick, this defined benefit versus defined contribution, right? So we talked about a 401k, and from a tax standpoint, both plans work exactly the same. I put money in it and I can defer it till a future point. Now in a defined benefit plan, it will give you potentially higher amounts of deferrals immediately. And the reason for that is because they basically engineer it backwards. So instead of defining what you're putting into it, they say, okay, how much money do you want to have on the back end of this, and then they calculate it that way. So let's say I want to have $150,000 retirement income, and I expect that to grow at X percentage. Then they would say, okay, that now requires a contribution of $78,000, right? So it can be significantly greater deferral amounts than what we're getting in the traditional place. And so what I would say to that is that if you're a high income earner, and if you own a business especially, then definitely it's worth considering as part of the overall plan. Maybe not the single thing, but as part of the overall plan, it can be really valuable. But what we're going to talk about next, and Rod will hit on, is why there's a lot of value in moving from this in conjunction with your kind of traditional qualified plan deferrals, how you can also get permanent tax savings using what we're going to call alternative tax strategies.
Well, we have some few questions that are popping up, but actually I'm going to put that on hold because I want to hear what Rod has to say about that, about the permanent tax savings. I myself would love to learn more about that. So Rod, kind of elaborate what Christian is talking about.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so and this gets back to the earlier question about, my CPA often points me away from these things, and that is a big surprise to me, because to me, a CPA should be helping you learn about these kinds of things, because as an example, and it's a really simple example, real estate is a huge way where you can create some tax savings now that you just can't create in other ways. So as an example, let's say you buy a piece of property, and the way that that the taxes apply to that, they have some depreciation associated with it, right? So I'm going to use some words that may or may not be really familiar to people. And try not to get too deep down into the weeds, but at least give enough information that you can see, oh man, there really actually are some really good opportunities here to create these savings. And so we can connect later and try to get into more detail. But the idea is that when I buy that piece of property and I can create that depreciation, well, historically and forever, I'm spreading that depreciation over a period of time. And every year when I experience some depreciation on that property, that becomes a deduction on my tax, right? Well, depending on the way that
I was just going to say, so normally they do it over 27 and a half years. So you buy the property, you deduct the amount that's the land, and then you take the actual physical property on the land, and we do a depreciation schedule. Now, there's some other things we can do. We maybe hit on cost segregation in a minute too, where we can, or bonus depreciation. So there's things that we can do in addition to that, but that's just maybe a reference point for how depreciation is calculated. And what it then does is it becomes an actual tax reduction that you can carry out each and every year. And this is why so many wealthy people love real estate.
Right. Makes sense. We have a question from the audience here, and this is kind of a random question, but I think that's something that you guys could really talk about and really educate. He is asking, what is your thoughts on conservation easement as a tax strategy?
Yeah, great question. So conservation easements can be a really good way to go. Now, with any of these types of things, the devil's in the details, right? And so you always have to make sure you're aligning yourself with an operator who knows what they're doing and is doing it right. So in conservation easement, there are basically what you're doing is you're buying a piece of property, and getting back to the earlier point of kind of being motivated by the way the law is written. Well, as you know, government is interested in having green space, right? In other words, land that stays undeveloped. And so if you buy a piece of property in exchange for basically the commitment to never develop on that property, or for example, never drill or mine on that property, then they'll give you a huge deduction right now to do it. And so it sounds awesome, right? And it is. It's an amazing opportunity. And so again, just make sure that you're aligning yourself with the right operator. And again, we're happy to assist. We know people that we can align you with to do this. But that's definitely one of the strategies that we were planning to bring up, because it's worth for the
right
who
person. Yeah, it can absolutely be worth. And there's there's a few other things that kind of fit in that same category that might be worth talking about. For example, we talk about and have helped people do what's called captive insurance or captive insurance company. So again, if you're a high income earner, particularly if you're a business owner, but really if you're a high income earner, then using like a captive insurance company can be a really powerful way to reduce taxes. And basically the way that works is that, well, first off, I should probably talk about the premise of it, and then I'll talk about really quickly how it works. So captives are basically you replacing the insurance that you would pay outside. Now, you don't have to actually replace that, but the idea there is that you're self-insuring, right? And so the government has given tax benefits to someone who self-insures. So what happens then is you put money into it, but it's your own captive. And when you do that, from a tax standpoint, here's what happens. I put money in, and I can move that money from being taxed at regular capital gains. Sorry, I'm getting it wrong. Rod, help me out.
You're moving it from ordinary income.
Ordinary income
going
to
in, you get that deduction now. Yep. So that when
sorry.
you then later.
Yep. So basically we have, generally speaking, we've got people paying ordinary income. When I put the money in there, I can change from ordinary income to capital gains. Now, what's really cool, and this is kind of a teaser, we have a strategy where we can completely eliminate the taxes on it. So in other words, not just reducing from ordinary income to capital gains, which is huge, by the way. If you get taxed at 40% and then all of a sudden you can bring that down to 15 and, let's say 15 and 5 for your state, that could be a 50% reduction in the tax. Now, what we can do is show you how to take that another step, and utilizing some really cool stuff, we can completely eliminate the taxes on it. So that's just a kind of teaser. If anybody's in that world and wants to talk about some of these alternative tax strategies, we're of course happy to get into the details. And, we got to figure out if it's a fit, because all of these are ideas, and they have their place, but they shouldn't be for everybody, right? Like, for example, a conservation easement, most people would suggest is a little bit more progressive or risky, right? I would just suggest to that, which is kind of getting back to the question, is simply, if it's right for you and you have the right person helping you put it together, it can be fantastic and powerful, and you'll be completely on the right side of the line.
I mean, it sounds like it's really depends on the person's situation, right? There's not like a one size fits all. Like, okay, you can do the conservation easement, you and you and you. No, everyone's a little different there. And I just learned something new, just what you guys just talk about as far as conservation easement and as well as the insurance strategy here. Okay, so guys, keep the questions coming. These are some good questions. These are some
great questions. I'm super impressed.
Yeah, so keep it coming, guys. You can type it in the comments, and if you want to be anonymous, just message to me. I'm still looking here, but we're gonna move along here because before you know it, we haven't even talked about other things about tax strategy. So let's just dive right into it now. So obviously, everyone wants to pay less taxes. They want the right strategies. They want the strategies where it's not going to put them in jail or anything like that. Look, everything you guys are talking about is perfectly legal. Unfortunately, sometimes if you don't know about it, or maybe your CPA doesn't know about it, they're going to say, hey, I don't know if that'll work, right? Just because they don't know about it doesn't mean that it is not legit, because maybe they're just covering themselves. So let's dive right into it. Let's talk about some of those strategies and what we should be looking for.
Okay, so I can jump in here. Rod and I kind of put out a list of some of the primary things that we wanted to hit on. And so we've kind of talked about, and we've kind of hit on some of them a little bit, but we talked about qualified plans. If you're somebody that owns a bit, or if you're someone, if you're in a practice and you have an opportunity to put money into your 401k or a defined benefit plan, particularly if it's matched in some way, then definitely take advantage of it, because that's a really simple and good way to reduce taxes in a given year. Now, not everybody has those opportunities, and so we have to kind of move to the next space. So when we go through and we go past the qualified plan world, we have a handful of things that we talk about. We've talked about real estate and depreciation. That can be incredibly powerful. And not only can it be powerful from the standpoint Well, let's put it this way. Above and beyond traditional depreciation, there's also cost segregation. So there's a way to dramatically accelerate that so that instead of depreciating that property over 27 years, you can do it over maybe 5 years or 10 years. So the reason that everyone doesn't do that is because there's a little more cost to having that put together. And so normally it's on higher value properties and things like that. But just remember, if you want to reduce taxes, depreciation is a great way to do it. Purchasing real estate can be an incredibly smart way. And really, our experience is that a lot of our highest net worth clients consistently do these types of things year in and year out to build their net worth, one, but also keep their taxes as low as possible while they're doing it. So that's real estate. And then we have a couple other things under the real estate to consider. 1031 exchanges are helpful. So if you're trying to get rid of taxes, now this isn't an ordinary income, or this is a tax that when you're selling a piece of property. If you want to move it into another property, you can do the 1031 exchange. That gives you a chance to avoid paying the capital gains taxes at that point in time. In all reality, that one, we're pushing it forward. Now, having said that, I could push it forward till I die and actually get a step up in basis and eliminate that tax completely. So if I'm someone that likes to buy and hold real estate, then depreciation and using 1031s and a step up in basis in combination or in conjunction with one another can be an incredibly powerful and dynamic way to keep taxes down and build wealth.
And this is where we anticipate.
Go ahead, Rod.
Yeah, so this is where we anticipate, what some of those CPAs might come back with, because when we start talking about depreciation, well, when I do that depreciation, it actually lowers my basis in the properties, right? So in other words, if I paid, $500,000 for the property, it's a commercial property, we're depreciating it over time. Every time I get that depreciation, then it reduces my basis. In other words, I no longer have a cost basis of 500,000. It would go down to 450 and 400, and so as I'm realizing that, then the cost basis goes down. So the CPA will say, well, that's not putting you in a better place. Well, that's where the 1031 exchange comes in, right? Because then, if I ever decide to sell that piece of property, but then I go and purchase some property somewhere else, then it's just a like exchange. I move my basis into the new one. I don't have to pay the capital gains at that time. And because one of the biggest things that we believe in is creating streams of cash flow, right? So not just building up assets for the sake of their value, but for their ability to create streams of income, because that allows me to replace my working income, right? If I can replace my working income, then I can become financially free, right? And real estate is obviously an amazing way to do that. And so, like Christian said, if you were listening to that and thinking, well, but holding the property forever till I die, et cetera, et cetera. Well, again, it's not for the sake of the value of the property that you would be doing that. It's for the sake of the streams of income that you can be creating that produce predictable income till the day you die, right? And then when you follow that all the way back out to there, and you get that step up in basis, then that's where we're creating a situation where it didn't matter if I took the depreciation and that lowered my basis, right? Because I eventually just ultimately, real quickly, that step up just means that when I die, whatever the value of the property is on that day, my basis rises to that number. So if my children sell the property the very next day, it's not going back to how much I paid for it and calculating capital gains after that. It's taking the value of the property on the day I died and calculating the capital gains off of that. And so, huge difference, right? I could hold the property for 50 years, right? You think about what people were paying 50 years ago on property, and there'd represent huge capital gains right now if they sold it, right? But if you get that step up in basis, then none of that matters.
So I have this question. I know we're going to go into this from an audience member, and I'm a younger doctor. I'm just now starting out. What should I be doing as far as saving and creating wealth if I'm just starting out?
So the first thing is you've got to come up with
more complicated than this is what you do. I mean, everyone's a little different there, but I guess
yeah. Well, I think I can lay out a little bit of a strategy, at least a couple of things to consider, right? So the first thing that we tell people to do is you've got to have a saving strategy. In other words, you've got to define how much you're going to save, and then you've got to second build an opportunity fund, right? So an opportunity fund is where we put money that we want to potentially invest. So a couple of things. Maybe I should back up. First, we want to come up with a savings rate. Try to come up with something. Let's say 20%. That would be a great number for people to work to. If they can get to that point, then you can build significant wealth for sure. So the saving rate is the first part. And then we've got to define where we're going to put it. That's what brings us to the opportunity fund. And one of the things that we talk about is making sure your opportunity fund is working for you, that it's not your bank account. So one of the concepts that we teach, we call the investment optimizer, is basically a highly optimized dividend paying whole life insurance policy that's built to flow money in and out of it. And really the goal there is to earn more interest than I would in the bank and have tax benefits. So the first step, again, make sure you're saving somewhere that will work. And then the next step, I would say, I probably skipped a step. You've got to have your emergency fund in place. So that probably, as I go back, that needs to happen first and foremost. Get to where you have 6 months of liquid cash so that if something comes up, it doesn't derail you, right? And I could probably get into, there's other insurances and things that are important to have in place, especially if you're young and starting out. But back to kind of the more fun stuff, the investment side, we get the opportunity fund in place, we start our saving, and then we've got to start doing some due diligence, right? We have to actually study some of Rod used the word operators. That's the word for people who are running different funds. So let's say I'm interested in real estate syndications. I want to make sure that I'm doing some due diligence into some of those. Now, if you don't know syndicators, if you want to get into the real estate space and you're just not sure how, and the same thing applies for qualified plans and things like that. But because we do so much in that alternative space, we can certainly point you to some places to give you a starting point, right? But I think getting into a community of like-minded people who are also looking for investment opportunities can be really critical. And I think that's part of what we're kind of doing here, right? We have a bunch of like-minded people who are looking for a lot of the same goals. So those would be kind of my first steps, I guess. Like you said, Glenn, this probably could be a much longer, outlined question, but I think doing those things will give you a great start.
And I'll say this to that, doctor, reach out, do the consultation. If you only know what you know, right? So, obviously there's a whole bunch of value that Christian just dropped off, but I will tell you this, just from talking to them off air, that's just a tip of the iceberg. You guys really need to call and reach out to them. And, at the end of the day, they're happy to do a consultation for everybody in this group. We haven't even got to the Nifty deal because we still got some more stuff to talk about. But at the end of the day, just reach out to them. We'll put the landing page later. You guys can reach out. There's an awesome ebook that you can get and start reading on there. And then from there, after you go through the ebook, reach out to them. Okay, we're going to take one more question, and then we're really going to let them continue, okay? But this is
that sounds great. We're happy to do questions.
Yeah, so this doctor is asking about where are you getting your deal flow? I guess where you're getting deals. I think that's what he's asking, deal flow, deals. And are these people who are bringing the deals and the investment opportunities, are you guys vetting them?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the nice thing for us is because we work with a lot of people who are investors, we get to see a lot of the things that they're doing, but then we ourselves are investors, right? We live what we talk about, right? And so we have done a lot of the vetting. We have relationships with, whether they be the specific operators or whether they be again just experienced people who have worked with a lot of different operators. And so yes, we have a lot of people that we can link up with, and anybody who's looking at any deal should do some of their own due diligence with it, right? So even though we feel comfortable, we want to make sure that anyone who is aligning with any individual operator or any individual deal is comfortable with that. Plan on doing your own due diligence. Christian talked a minute ago about starting to do that research and figuring it out. And just make a habit of on a regular basis plugging in, whether you're listening to a podcast, whether you're getting online and just looking at specific strategies or in this case, looking at specific deals and operators. Just get used to the jargon. And so that when you start getting into it and you're looking at your own deals, then there becomes a natural flow that you can understand and really get comfortable with the deal and with who you're looking at.
Can I just add, I would say, like, I like the saying trust but verify. So that's kind of the way to do it, I think. But to be really direct and answer his or her question, we have a lot of relationships with people that do this. And kind of put simply, where are we getting it? It's because we just have been in this so long and we do this every day, all day, that we have, tons of relationships. And so we probably won't drop specific names of people on air. However, certainly we can point you in the right direction off air. So if you're looking for any type of, or maybe it's a conversation and we're saying, hey, what's going to reduce your tax liability? And then where do we need to go from there to actually implement it? So we have lots of really great operators that we work with, and we're, of course, happy to introduce them appropriately to listeners as it makes sense.
I'll say this. These are great questions, guys. Keep them coming. If I can't get to all the questions, I apologize. I'll make sure that I'll email them to Christian and Rod, and I'll even set you guys up, and you guys can talk via consultation, via Zoom, and get that kind of one-on-one there. But those are really good. I mean, those are the type of questions that's a whole live stream that we could talk about. I mean, that's
for sure.
That's really good questions there. Okay, so let's go back to everyone's big question that I see it in the group all the time, and that is, okay, there's going to be a new president, maybe not. Most likely, probably, right? But who knows, right? This year has been crazy. Yep. Who knows, right? But let's just say that there's a new president now, and there brings a lot of uncertainty, right? There's a lot of people in this group feel like, okay, we're going to get taxed more. Are these things going to happen? What should I do? So obviously, no one has a crystal ball here, but you guys have already looked at this and anticipated, okay, if this happens, we can look at here. If this happens, we look at that. But I'll start with you, Christian, and Rod, I'll let you follow up. What are some of the things that we really need to kind of be aware of if there's a change in the presidency?
Okay, so I kind of have two pieces of advice here, right? So let's see, I think I've been doing this now 16-ish years, right? That's when we started. And I would say first, the bark is always bigger than the bite, right? So like there's a lot of concern every time we have this changeover. And the reality is that most of the things that we do, that we work with, haven't changed and don't change. Now, that's not to say nothing can, right? Like several years ago, we saw a massive change in the estate tax that went from, $1 million per person to now we're sitting at, 10 plus. So there are changes that happen, but I would say first, the bark is always bigger than the bite. So try to relax a little. Most likely, it's not going to have the impact that you expect or that you're worried about. Number two is try to do and focus on things that won't likely be impacted regardless of who the president is. So in other words, there are several things that just aren't, that aren't huge concerns. They're not really on the table from a tax consideration. And so if we focus on some of those strategies, if you're concerned, then maybe you can take a wait and see approach. But I would say if you focus first on the things that don't require or that really aren't even, concerns as far as being changed. Anyway, those are kind of the two major pieces of advice I have. Rod, what do you think?
Yeah, so the main thing that comes to my mind, there's this concept that we talk about of pay now or pay later, right? So in other words, and it just even goes back to the difference between a traditional IRA versus a Roth IRA, right? Most of you out there are saying
pay tax now or later, right?
Yeah, pay the tax now or pay it later. And when you hear Roth, a lot of you are thinking, well, man, I graduated from the ability to use Roths a long time ago, right? Because I'm sure that's the case with a lot of the listeners. But there actually are Roth equivalent things in terms of pay the tax now and then put it in the right place, and you will never pay a tax on that again, right? But here's the critical piece that I think a lot of people misunderstand as it relates to that question. And that is, if I'm in the same tax bracket now as I will be in retirement when I retire, then I'm going to pay the same tax either way, right? And there are probably people who are saying, well, no, I was told if I put the money in the 401k today because it grows pre-tax, then I have more later when I retire. And that's a true statement. But let's say my effective tax bracket right now is 25%, right? And so I set aside the funds today pre-tax, right? I save that 25% now. Well, when I retire later and it's a bigger number, let's just use really easy numbers. Let's say that I had 100,000 today, but by putting it aside, I saved 25 grand, right? But then let's say it grew to pre-tax, right? That 100,000 now grew and became $1 million when I retire. Well, when I take that money out in retirement and I'm still at that 25% tax bracket, now it's $250,000 that I owe in tax. And so it grew proportionally to what I put aside if I'm in the same tax bracket when I retire as when I am today, right? So now that just brings up a whole lot of questions. Okay, well, like Christian said earlier, where are taxes going, right? Another question is, will I have the same kinds of deductions when I'm in retirement as I do today while I'm paying down my house, while I have kids at the house, etc., right? Those are deductions that are going to go away. And so I potentially, even if I'm in the same tax or the same income level, I'll be owing more in tax because I'll have fewer deductions. So these are all things to think about. And so I guess at the end of the day, what I'm saying is a little bit of a twist and probably not the reason why people were listening to this, but to maybe help you feel better about paying the tax now, because you actually in the long term can create a situation where you have huge tax, paying less in tax over the long haul by paying some today, setting it aside in the type of vehicle where you can basically, it acts like a Roth. You're never going to pay tax on that again, even with all the growth that you're able to create with it. And just put yourself in a better position long term.
I mean, that's kind of, for those who are listening, guys, if you like what you're hearing, type in the comment section, money on insights. And I'm sure that you guys want to have an opportunity to kind of talk to them a little bit more because we're hitting on a lot of stuff. But it's kind of eye-opening for me because if you could be doing the right thing, right? Growing a practice, paying your taxes, growing your business, doing all the right things. And if you just don't plan right, come retirement age, you could really get in trouble. That's what I kind of got out of that, right? Like, I'm not trying to scare anybody, but it's like if you're not planning things right, and like I said, maybe you're taking these deductions, maybe you had those deductions at that time, and now you're at a different point in your life, and kids are gone, and all these different things. You could be kind of in trouble if you don't plan for that. I'm just going to ask you guys, as someone who's just kind of, letting that soak in. I mean, with your own clients, with your clients, are you kind of planning them? Are you kind of force, planning it really far out? Like, hey, this is like 10 years. This is like 20 years. This is what's going to happen here. How often do you guys do that with your clients?
Always. The simple answer is that for the type of planning that we do, failure really isn't an option. So we need to make sure that it's working today. And really it's a balance, right? It goes back to, we want to have the right tax reduction strategies to keep our income low and keep more of our money, right? Keep more of our money is the key word. And so we want to do the things today that allow us to keep more of our money. And then going forward, we have to know what the implications of those are in the long term. And so we're going to balance between different types of taxes, different types of investments, and we're going to help people get to kind of the holy grail, right? Where they're not having to worry about money. And really there's a simple and defined process to get there. And I'm going to talk about kind of some ideas that people can use, some action items that they can take that'll be really beneficial, helping them make that move here in a second. But yeah, that's kind of my thought around it.
Okay. All right. Well, let's just dive right into that. We
okay. Can I throw it out?
We've been getting so much great questions, and guys, you know what? Give me those questions later. I'll pass it on, but there's a lot of amazing things that they want to share. So let's just jump right into it. And all that means,
okay, cool.
Bring you back.
We've been talking, Glenn, about potentially doing like a consultation. Here's the thing. We want to make this a little more interesting, a little bit more fun. I realize that like the word consultation is probably like the most boring word on planet Earth, right? So we did something that we think is really cool and we're really excited about. We've been using. So two things. First off, go to moneyinsights.net /Nifty, right? moneyinsights.net /Nifty. And you're going to find two things there. First, you're going to find a copy of the ebook Money Insights for Dentists. And this is just your step-by-step, very simple. It's a 38-page ebook that will tell you exactly how to get from that place where you're earning a high income, but it'll give you the steps you need to take in order to kind of take things to the next level and go to high net worth. So that's the first part. The second part is that when you download the ebook, there's going to be a pop-up that says, take the get your F3 score right. F3 score now. So Rod and I created what we call a financial freedom factor score and an assessment, and it's really simple. It's basically a 15-question quiz that will actually put out a score, right? So it's a score through 100, and you'll get a better idea of kind of what your score is, where you're at. And that's a great jumping off point to say, okay, here's where I'm at. What are some things I need to do? So whether you visit with us, meet with us or not, we're going to, by just doing the F3 assessment, that'll give you feedback and help you get an idea of where to go. What will happen then is for those of you who want to connect with us, we'll take a deeper dive and say, okay, now we're going to learn about your situation individually, and we'll talk about actual strategies, ideas, and things that you can implement to really make it work. So those are two things. The ebook, Nifty, at moneyinsights.net /Nifty. And then don't forget to take the F3 assessment. I think you'll find that it gives you a really good grasp on where you're at so you can know where you want to take things.
Okay, so guys, I just put the web address there. Ignore the first one. I put the wrong one up there. I put the right one up just now, and I'm going to go ahead and put this in the comments section. And like I said, there's an ebook there. That's kind of a good starting point. But you know what? If you want to reach out and talk, you can do that as well. But that's a good start. I'm going to put that in the comments section.
Take the quiz. Like if you want to reach out, what we would say is take the F3 assessment. It takes like 5-10 minutes. That's the best way to connect with us, because it gives you a chance to kind of get a feel for where you're at and some of the things that we're doing. And then at that point, we can decide whether it makes sense to talk a little bit more. But go in there, download the ebook, take that F3 assessment, and we'll see where it takes us.
Christian, how long is that assessment?
It's really simple. 5-10 minutes, 15 questions.
Okay.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. All right. So, man, I can't believe it. I mean, we've been talking for almost an hour now, and I feel like
it went longer than we planned, didn't it?
I mean, there were so many great questions, but all that means is I'm gonna have to bring you guys back on for sure. I have to bring you guys back on. Okay, so we got the ebook. Okay, after the ebook, do the assessment. After you do the assessment, at that point, everyone's gonna have all the information ready to really have a really good, productive consultation.
Yeah, and again, the reason for it is that, if it doesn't make sense to me, then go through and get the value out of the ebook. And by the way, we have a whole bunch of stuff that you can get to at moneyinsights.net if you want to check out white papers, videos about some of the strategies we use. That's all there. But by doing that, I think it's just a win for both sides, because it allows you to get an idea of where you're at, and us to get an idea. And then if it makes sense at that point, we'll connect and kind of take things to the next level.
I love it. Okay, so before we jump off here, I'm going to go to you, Rod. But what's just a piece of advice that you can give to all the doctors in this group? There's doctors from the beginning of their career, mid-career, near the end of the career. Either way, they're going through, and yes, we use these two things here, our two hands to create wealth in our practice, right? But we know that you can't just depend on this. You got to have some planning there. So for those who are watching, what is your piece of advice as far as just being able to take care of yourself financially, not only for yourself, but for your family as well?
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest keys is something I kind of hinted at earlier, and that is your ability to take set aside some of what you're earning toward building net worth. Okay. But building net worth, one of the biggest things you can do is create streams of income, right? If the whole idea, if you've never read Rich Dad Poor Dad or Cash Flow Quadrant, Robert Kiyosaki, kind of some of these classics about what I'm talking about here, the value of streams of income is infinitely greater than just the value of the actual asset. And so, and one of the biggest challenges we have is the traditional way of retirement planning would say, build it all up in your retirement accounts and then turn that into your stream of income when you retire, right? Well, one of the biggest problems with that, I mean, I don't know if any of you have heard of like the 4% rule, for example. In other words, when you get to that day and you say, okay, Mr. Broker, I'm ready to retire. How much income can I safely take out of this nest egg without running out before I die, right? And the old 4% rule means, okay, if I've built up, $2 million, then they would say, okay, let's start out at 80,000 a year, right? Well, 2 million sounds like a lot, but 80,000 probably doesn't, right? Off of what you built up. And the problem is the decade of the 2000s kind of killed the 4% rule. So now the brokers, more of them are talking about more like a 3%, 3.5%. So now you're at 2 million and 60,000 of income. Well, again, I think you're kind of getting the idea that there's just an inherent problem with that approach because number one, I have to save up a ton of money to replace my income. And number two, even then there are question marks around that. Right.
Well, I have to say this. I mean, it sounds like, you work so hard and I got a message here. That doesn't sound good. It's like you work so hard and then you have to, and then in your golden years, right?
Yeah.
Where you're supposed to enjoy life, you're making your life worse.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes it really bad. And I mean, one of the things you'll find on our website, we're going to launch a podcast here pretty quick. And that's one of the things one of the episodes you can look forward to is where we focus on this conversation. But again, the idea is that for people who followed that track, there are just really a lot of pitfalls associated with it. They're afraid to spend their own money.
Yeah.
Right. So
Christian,
would you like to get a shot at that question, Glenn?
Yeah, of course.
Awesome. So I have kind of three really quick pieces of advice. Number one is save, right? You can't build wealth if you don't save money. Like if there's no money to do it, it doesn't go, right? So that's number one. Number two, high income earners have to consider tax planning. Tax planning is critically important. It can be a huge differentiator in how much wealth you're able to build. And then number three is consider, if you have not yet, consider looking at some of the things in the alternative investment space. Because if you're an accredited investor, which just means that you've had I'm not going to go into the definitions actually, but basically for accredited investors, which are high income earners generally or have a high net worth, there's some opportunities out there that are just really fantastic and waiting. So those are my three pieces of advice: consider save, consider taxes, and go into the alternative investment space. And doing those three things alone will make a huge impact on anyone's ability to grow and preserve their wealth.
I love it. Guys, thank you so much for jumping on. I'm going to say one last thing. And really, we went to dental school. Most of us, we went to dental school. We didn't have much dental knowledge. So we went through school. We, learned all the skills to become a dentist, right? You don't understand how much work it went to that. Yet, why is it when we get out of dental school and we're making that money that we turn to the internet or our buddy down the street or one of our relatives and say, hey, what should I do with my money? Right? So I want everyone who's watching right now, just really think about that, right?
Even just the media, right?
Yeah. I mean, just think about it. Okay. You went through all this school to become a good dentist, right? And now you have some money. Now you're accumulating wealth. And then you ask your next door neighbor what you're supposed to do with it. Right? That does not make sense at all. So that's the reason why I'm so excited to have Money Insights in here, because look, you need to learn. You need to work with professionals who this is what they do all day long. Okay. They don't go to each other and say, like, Rod doesn't go to Christian's house and say, hey, look, I have a toothache and can you fix it? No, he doesn't do that. He goes sees his dentist. Okay.
We'll go see you.
Right. And look, and if you're not sure about what to do with your tax planning, what to do with investments, whether or not your CPA is really the right CPA for you, and you're in this particular stage of your career, you need to talk to people who know what they're doing. And that's where Money Insights come in. They've made a great offer. That is, look, read the ebook, get some information, take the assessment so you kind of know what's going on. And based off of that, they can be more of a service for you. So that's what I want to end that with. Rod, Christian, thank you so much for jumping on. I have a feeling I'll have to bring you on a lot sooner next time because there are so many questions there. And guys, if you have more questions, just message it to me. I will email them. In fact, I'll do one better. I'll connect you guys. So again, guys, thank you so much for jumping on.
Thanks,
Thank
Glenn.
you, Glenn.
See you guys later.